Chapter 23 Pigeons or Peacocks? The members of the family appeared on time for breakfast the next morning, and everyone wore an air of strangeness and expectancy. They knew that today Father would make his decision about going back to England, and until the decision was made, they felt ill at ease and somehow like a group of strangers sitting together at the familiar breakfast table. Only Annabel was perfectly at ease. "Tom," she said, looking at him with a new interest in her bright eyes, "when you are an English lord, you must not forget your little cousin Annabel." "If you mean that you're giving up your Boston clergyman," said Tom bluntly, "you needn't count on me, Annabel. I've got my girl all picked." "Tom, what nonsense," said Mother. "Go on and eat your porridge." "I know," buzzed Hetty. "Tom loves cake." Tom reached hastily for the bread and, by some mysterious accident, upset Hetty's glass of milk onto her lap, so that the object of Tom's affections was never publicly revealed. During the confusion of mopping up Hetty, Caddie sat silent. She had dreamed last night about England. There had been peacocks and towers and moats, and it had seemed that the Woodlawn children were to be presented to the Queen, but then all the others had vanished, and only Caddie had gone on alone. And then she had found herself holding the hand of a little boy, such a funny little boy with a sailor suit and a wide hat and red hair, and the little boy had been crying because he was hungry. And when they had reached the Queen's palace, there had been a great barred gate, and through the gate they could see that the Queen had peacocks too, but they could not get through the gate, and then soldiers had come and driven them away, and Caddie had wakened up and found that it was morning. Father's voice broke through the memory of her dream. Caddie turned and looked at him, and she thought that he was nicer sitting thus at the head of his simple table than he could ever be in any other place. "I have been thinking," he said, "that you children are old enough to have some part in the decision which we must make today. It would hardly be fair for me alone, or for Mother and me, to say, without consulting you, either that you must give up your American citizenship and return to England, or that you shall remain here, giving up a good deal of money and a high position in England. After all, Mother and I have already lived a half of our lives, and they've been worth the living, haven't they, Harriet?" Mother smiled tremulously and nodded at him. "But you young ones have all of your lives before you, and you already have some ideas of what you wish to make of them. It would be a pity for someone else to make a wrong decision for you. So I think it best that we should take a family vote. Since we are still on American soil, and have always considered ourselves good Americans, we shall vote in the American way by written ballot. That is, each child shall decide for himself what he wishes to do. Then, without telling anyone else what he has decided, he shall write 'go' or 'stay' on a piece of paper, which he shall then fold and place between the leaves of the family Bible in the parlor. We shall vote this afternoon at 4 o'clock, and in the meantime I want you to discuss it among yourselves and ask Mother and me as many questions as you like, and, above all, I want you to think for yourself. What will be best for my future? Where shall I be most useful and happy?" "Shall I vote too, Papa?" asked little Minnie, climbing onto Mr. Woodlawn's knee and looking earnestly into his face. "Yes, you too, little Minnie. Every Woodlawn shall vote except baby Joe, and his future we others must decide among us." At mention of his name the baby bounced in his high chair and banged his boot upon his tray. "You and I shall not be allowed to vote, baby Joe," said Annabel, "but never you mind. You'll be a little English gentleman before this day is over, I'll be bound." "Goo goo," said baby Joe, and showed his 2 new teeth in a pink smile. Then for a long time Father spoke to them quietly and earnestly, like an impartial judge, setting forth the advantages and disadvantages of this move. He spoke of England more warmly than they had ever heard him speak before, picturing its beauties and the high place which they would be called to fill there. Then he spoke of America, and he did not say as many fine things of it as he had often said in the past, and Caddie knew why. It was because his heart belonged here in Wisconsin, and he did not wish to let his own preference prejudice his children. But he did speak briefly of the freedom which belonged to them in a new country, and he said that, although they might never be rich or famous in America, they would have the satisfaction of knowing that what they had made for themselves. "An inherited fortune is never quite one's own," said Father slowly. "And yet I want you to understand that money and power are also great things, and that great good may come of them if they are wisely handled." Then he pushed back his chair from the table and took off his hat, and went out to see that the horses had a measure of oats. "Do you think that Father wants to go back and be a lord?" asked Tom, as he and Caddie and Warren walked away to the lake. "I guess he doesn't want us to know what he wants," said Caddie in a low voice. He'd rather we make up our own minds." "I can't see Father going back there where they treated him so badly once," said Tom. "Father's the kind of man who likes to do things for himself. I don't suppose that English lords mend clocks and feed horses and put locks on guns for Indians, do you?" "They don't have to," shouted Warren. "Well, Father doesn't have to either, but I think he'd miss it if he didn't do it." "I think that Father likes to be at the front of things," said Caddie. "He likes to be free and help build new places. I think he'd rather go on west than go back to an old country where everything is finished." "I would too," said Tom. "I'd rather build a new mill in America than live in a castle in England that somebody who died hundreds of years ago had the fun of building. That's how I feel." "Me too," said Warren. "I guess we three will vote the same," said Caddie. "But Mother and Clara and Hetty and Minnie will all be on the other side, and I don't know about Father. What he wants won't matter so much as what he thinks would be best for us. And, he likes to make Mother happy." They climbed onto the raft and Tom pushed off from shore. John's dog rode with them, his head on Caddie's knee. "Poor fellow," said Caddie. "I don't know what John'll think if I can't look after you till he gets back." A cloud of gloom floated along with them as they went down the lake on that bright August morning. It was almost 4 o'clock, and the Woodlawn children had washed their hands and faces and smoothed their hair as if they were getting ready for a party. "Just practicing up to be little lords and ladies," said Annabel, who was as much excited as the rest of them, and even Tom was too distraught to answer her. Caddie had gone off by herself to sit under a tree until Father should call her in to vote. She had closed her eyes because the bees and birds and crickets sounded so much louder when she did, and it was fun to listen to them and try to tell from which direction each sound came. Soon, perhaps, she would be hearing English sounds. Suddenly a hot little hand was thrust into hers, and she opened her eyes in surprise to see Hetty gazing earnestly into her face. "Caddie, I'm going to vote like you do. Did you know that?" "How do you know how I'm going to vote?" asked Caddie. "We're not supposed to tell." "Oh, I could guess that," said Hetty gravely. "You like it here better than any place, and so do I. I want to be an American." Suddenly Caddie gave the round cheek a kiss. She had not remembered to kiss Hetty for a long time. "Hetty," she said, "no matter whether we go to England or stay in Wisconsin, let's be better chums, shall we?" At 4 o'clock they went into the parlor, and Father gave them all slips of paper exactly alike. There were pen and ink on the table beside the big Bible, and each member of the family wrote something on his or her slip, dried it, folded it, and placed it somewhere in the Bible. Father and Mother had slips of paper like the children, and they did the same. Minnie took longest because she had only just learned how to print, and it had taken Hetty most of the morning to teach her how to print go and stay. But everyone waited quietly until she had finished. "You must be writing stay," whispered Hetty into Caddie's ear. "She can't do S and Y very fast. Go wouldn't take her half so long, unless she's forgotten how." Caddie's heart began to beat more quickly. What if Minnie did vote stay? Hetty had voted to stay. That would make 5 on their side. Of course, Clara and Mother would be on the other side, and no one knew what Father would vote. Caddie knew that Mother's and Father's and even Clara's votes would count for more than theirs, because they were only the young ones. Nevertheless, for the first time today she began to hope. She found herself shivering with excitement. Father took up the big Bible and looked through it until he had found 8 slips of paper. He unfolded the first paper and in a low, clear voice read, "Stay." One by one, 3 more slips were unfolded, and each one said, "Stay." "Those are ours, I guess," whispered Hetty. But Caddie squeezed her hand and said, "Hush," for Father was unfolding the 5th slip of paper. "Go," read Father in the same steady voice. Tom and Warren shuffled their feet restlessly. Tom seemed to hear Annabel's sweet voice saying, "Practicing up to be little lords and ladies," and he kicked out vivaciously at a rag rug which his restless feet had stuffed into a roll. Father unfolded the last 3 papers quickly and looked at them. Then he read them out. "Stay, stay, stay." "Hooray!" yelled Warren. But nobody else spoke for a moment. The solemnity of the occasion still had them spellbound. "There is only one vote to go," said Father slowly. "That one's mine," cried Clara. "Give it here and I'll tear it up. I don't want to go to England either." "But Harriet," said Father gravely, taking Mother's hand, "you wanted to go, my dear. Are you doing this for my sake?" "No, Johnny, I did it all for myself. We're all so happy here, and we might be wretched there. I never knew how much I loved it here until I had to choose. Better than England? Better than Boston? Home is where you are, Johnny." Suddenly she burst into tears and flung herself into Mr. Woodlawn's arms. "Hattie, Hattie, my little Harriet!" cried father, holding her close and kissing her. The children stood around with gaping eyes and mouths. Stranger even than an inheritance from England it was to see mother crying and father kissing her.